everyone. Here I am going to talk about the anatomy of basal nuclei. This section I will be explaining the location of the basal nuclei, its components, about the direct and indirect pathway and its clinical significance. And this is horizontal section of the cerebral hemisphere. This toes anteriorly. This is the frontal pole. Here this is toes posteriorly. This is the occipital pole. Here you can see this is a genu and this one is the splenium of the corpus callosum. Here this is the two thalama. Then here this cavity here is the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is thalamus. This cavity is the third ventricle. Here this is the cerebral cortex. This is gray matter. Then deep to this gray matter here this is the white matter or this white fibers. Then deep to this white matter you can see these masses of gray matter. These are the basal nuclei. So which lies in this cerebral hemisphere deep to this white matter of the cerebrum. So this one is the caudate nucleus here. This is the lentiform nucleus. So lentiform nucleus, the shape here, you can see this is a triangular shape. Okay. This has a medial part. This is called the globus pallidus, and this lateral part, that is the putamen. These two parts is separated by a white matter here, that is called the external medullary lamina. Then about this globus pallidus here, it has a medial part, that is the globus pallidus internus. This lateral part, that is the globus pallidus externus, or this external segment or internal segment, like that. Then lateral to the putamen, here again this gray matter, that is called the claustrum. Then between this claustrum and this putamen, here this is a white matter, that is the external capsule which contains corticostriate fibers. So this is the thalamus. This is the left one, left thalamus. This is a caudate nucleus. This white matter, these fibers, this is the internal capsule. Then here you can see this is the external capsule. Then lateral to this claustrum, again this white matter, this is the extreme capsule. Then lateral, here you can see this is the gray cortex here. That part is called the insula. So this insula is a hidden lobe which lies deep to the stem of the lateral sulcus. Okay. Then about these components of the basal nuclei, you can see here. So this is the thalamus. So here this is the two thalamus, you can see like this. Okay. Then here this is the caudate nucleus. Here we'll get the caudate nucleus. This is the lentiform nucleus. So here this is the lentiform nucleus, has a medial part and the lateral part. Lateral part is called, this is the putamen. Medial part, that is called the globus pallidus. Okay. Here we'll get the internal capsule. Then about the caudate nucleus, it has the head, body and tail. So head is attached to this putamen of this lentiform nucleus. Then it arches like this. Body, this is the body over the superior surface of this thalamus, relates to the superior surface of the thalamus. Then here this is the tail of the caudate nucleus, which ends here, relates to this amygdaloid body or this amygdaloid nuclei. Nuclei. So here this is the head, here this part is the body, and this is the tail of the caudate nucleus. This one is the lentiform nucleus, globus pallidus, and this is the putamen. Here like that in the right half also, this is thalamus here. Here we will get the lentiform nucleus. So here there is the head, then comes the body here like that. Then there is a tail which ends and relates to this amygdaloid body of the nucleus. Okay. Then about these components, the caudate nucleus and this lentiform nucleus, collectively called the corpus striatum. It is called the corpus striatum. And this caudate nucleus and this putamen, that is called the striatum or this neostriatum. Then the globus pallidus here is also called the pallidium or this pallistriatum. Then this claustrum with this amygdaloid body, that is called the archistriatum. Here again this is the horizontal section here. This goes anteriorly, this goes posteriorly. This is the genu and the splenium of the corpus callosum. This is the thalamus. Here this one is the third ventricle. This is the anterior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. Here this is the internal capsule. Here you can see this is the lentiform nucleus. laterally this area, this cortex here, this is the insula. Okay. Then this components here, this is the corpus striatum, that is the striatum, that is the or the new striatum. Then this is a palostriatum, which includes the globus pallidus. Okay. Then the archistriatum, the claustrum and the amygdala forms the archistriatum. The amygdala, that is the part of the limbic system. Additional to these, there you can see there is a subthalamic nucleus and the substantia nigra. The subthalamic nucleus, which lies below the thalamus, and the substantia nigra, this is a pigmental layer which you can see in this midbrain. These two parts are functionally relates to the basal nuclei. Here, coming to this pathways about this inputs and the outputs. Here, this is the coronal section. Here, this is the cerebral cortex. This is the white matter. This is the caudate nucleus. This is the putamen. This is the globus pallidus externus, internus. Then this thalamus. Here, this is the subthalamus. This is the substantia nigra. Okay. So, but the function of the basal nuclei, okay, it's a part of this extrapyramidal system. Okay. So, idea for performing motor activity that is actually taking place in the prefrontal area of this cerebral cortex. Then from there the information goes to this motor at this supplementary motor area, that is here the cerebral cortex. From there the information is going to this basal nuclei. Then there is the planning and the programming of the information takes place. So these forms the inputs here. From there the information is going back to the cerebral cortex through the thalamus. Okay, that is the outputs. Okay, outputs of this basal nuclei. Then it reaches this cerebral cortex, it's the motor area. From there the informations goes to this corticospinal tract, okay, through the corresponding muscles, then which performs movements. Okay. So this basal nuclei which helps in this planning and the programming of the movements, okay, for the proper coordinating and smoothing of this motor activities. Then these forms this direct and this indirect pathway. Coming to this direct pathway, here again this is the coronal section. This one is the cerebral cortex here. This is the white matter. This one is the caudate nucleus. This is the lentiform nucleus, that is the part of putamen. This is the globus pallidus externus, globus pallidus internus. This is the thalamus. This is the red nucleus. This is the subthalamus. This is substantia nigra. Okay, the substantia nigra has, this is the pars reticularis, this is the anterior part. This posterior part, that is called the pars compacta. Then here about this pathway, there is the fibers coming from the cerebral cortex to the striatum. These are called the corticostriate fibers. Okay, from this motor and the supplementary motor areas, these fibers, these are the corticostriate fibers. These are excitatory fibers. Okay, in the nerve endings here, it produces a neurotransmitter, that is glutamate. From there the information is going to this globus pallidus internus. Okay, here these are inhibitory fibers. Okay, here this nerve endings here, it produces a neurotransmitter, that is GABA. Okay, so the excitation of this globus pallidus here you can see these are the corticostriate fibers. These are excitatory here, which produces excitation of this striatum, which produces more GABA there. Okay, then this one striatopallidal, these are inhibitory fibers. Okay, from there this one here, the information goes to this thalamus. Okay, and also through this pars reticularis, also from there to the thalamus. This pallidothalamic fibers, from this globus pallidus internus to this thalamus, these are the pallidothalamic fibers. These are also inhibitory, okay, which produces here the neurotransmitter, that is a GABA. Okay, here, so this more GABA will produces here, which causes the inhibition of this pallidothalamic fibers. So less GABA only will produces in the thalamus. Okay, which causes the thalamus to fire up. Okay, so these fibers from here, the thalamus to the cortex, so these are the thalamocortical fibers. These are also excitatory. So there is less inhibition of the thalamus, which produces the thalamocortical fibers to fire up and will produces more glutamate, and there is the excitation of the cerebral cortex, that is the motor areas, which performs the movements. So this direct pathway is also called the excitatory pathway, which performs movements. Okay. Then coming to this indirect pathway, here this is the coronal section, this is cerebral cortex, this is the white matter, this is the caudate nucleus, this is the putamen, this is the globus pallidus externus, globus pallidus internus. Here this is the thalamus, this is subthalamus, this is substantia nigra, this is the pars reticularis, and this part is the pars compacta. About the pathway, here you can see the informations here. Here these are the corticostriate fibers to the striatum. Okay, these are the excitatory fibers which produces glutamate, the neurotransmitter and the nerve endings. From there, here this is going to this globus pallidus externus. Okay, here is towards the globus pallidus externus. So this striatopallidial fibers, these are inhibitory. Here will produces more GABA there. Okay. Then from there, here the information is going to the subthalamus. Okay, so this is the pallidosubthalamic fibers. So these are also here, these are inhibitory fibers. Okay, here which produces less GABA there. Okay, so here inhibition, here inhibitory fibers here. Then from the subthalamus, here the information is going to this globus pallidus internus. So this is the globus pallidus internus. So this is the subthalamo-pallidial fibers. So here less GABA will produces. Okay. Then so this subthalamo-pallidial fibers, these are excitatory fibers. Okay, here. Then from there the informations here is going from this pallidus to this thalamus. So these are the pallidothalamic fibers. So subthalamo-pallidal fibers are excitatory fibers. So here this is pallidothalamic fibers. Here this one is inhibitory. So which causes the excitation of the globus pallidus internus, will produces more GABA, okay, through this pallidothalamic fibers, okay, which causes the inhibition of the thalamus. Okay, there is the inhibition of the thalamus. From there are the thalamocortical fibers. Okay, so the thalamus gets inhibited. So there is the less production of the glutamate, and there is the inhibition of this one cerebral cortex, that is the less excitation of the cerebral cortex. Okay, that about this indirect pathway which inhibits the movements. So less excitation of the cerebral cortex which restricts the unwanted movements. Yes, here you can see this is direct pathway which promotes voluntary movement in the targeted muscles. Then in the indirect pathway which inhibits the accessory movements in relates to this targeted muscle. Okay. Then additionally, you can see here in this substantia nigra pars compacta contains neurons which uses dopamine. Okay, so the balance between this direct and indirect pathway is modulated by dopamine. That here you can see this is the cortex, cerebral cortex here. There will get the here will get the striatum. Okay, then here we'll get the substantia nigra. The anterior part is pars reticularis. Posterior part, this is the pars compacta. This is the substantia nigra. Here this is the cortex. So substantia nigra is getting informations from this cortex through this corticonigral fibers. These are corticonigral fibers. From there, this substantia nigra sends outputs, okay, to this striatum, okay, to this nigrostriatal fibers. Through these nigrostriatal fibers here, which contains receptors, that is the D1 and this D2 are there. So this dopamine is released in this pars compacta here. Okay, here this dopamine combines with the D1 receptors, okay, which gets activated through the direct pathway and which performs movements, and this dopamine combines with the D2 receptors which activated through this indirect pathway and which inhibits the movements. That is the function of the dopamine and the receptors, okay, it relates to this nigrostriatal pathway, the nigro and this to striatum. Okay. Then here, so the balance between this direct and indirect pathway I already told is modulated by this dopamine. Okay, so if there is any destruction of this dopaminergic cells in the substantia nigra, okay, which produces a neurological condition of which unknown cause, that is called this Parkinson's disease. Okay, so this dopamine cells gets destroyed. Okay, there is the losing the action of this dopamine on this direct and indirect pathway, which causes this overacting of this indirect pathway and the underactivity of this direct pathway. So this overactivity of this indirect pathway which produces this unwanted movements like the tremors and all, here this underactivity of this direct pathway which produces difficulty in this difficulty to perform movements, and also it's finding difficulty to initiate a movements. That is, you can see the slow movements and this rigidity here, the slow movements and this rigidity. These are the characteristic features of this Parkinson's disease, okay, which leads to this underactivity of the direct pathway and this overactivity here of this indirect pathway, which produces some accessory movements, okay, here the tremors and all here. So that's about this Parkinson's disease. Then okay, so here we discuss the components of this basal nuclei, then its connections, that is through this direct and this indirect pathway, and this function of the dopamine and this receptors in relates to this direct and indirect pathway, okay, and its significance to this Parkinson's disease. Okay, so here is the question: describe the components, connections, blood supply and applied anatomy of this basal nuclei. That's all. Thank you.